In chapter 15, Luke's gospel records Jesus' telling of the parable of the prodigal son. It's one of the greatest short stories ever told, and it's meant to point us to the truth about God's kingdom that's unfolding in the ministry of Jesus. Now, as Jesus tells the story, it ends with the part about the older brother, which I'm going to read to you. It says, "Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. 'Your brother is back,' he was told, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf. We're celebrating because of his safe return.' The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, 'All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. And yet, when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf.' His father said to him, 'Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found.'" If you go to a Cubs-Cardinals game here in Chicago, you'll find that because St. Louis is close enough, there are going to be a lot of Cardinals fans together in Wrigley Field with the Cubs fans. These people will be cheering for different teams, and you can have a whole stadium full of people who are in the same place, but they are not of one mind. They're not in one accord. The older brother in the story that Jesus tells is in the same place. He's there in proximity to the celebration that's taking place, but he's not willing to enter in. Here's what he says to his father who comes out to beg him to come in. He says, "All these years I've slaved for you." The younger son in the story that we've been talking about has tried to be in control through his wild living by doing whatever he wants. And the end of that story is he ended up working a dead-end job, wishing he could eat the feed that he was giving to the pigs. Now the older son we see is also in a similar circumstance because he tried to get control through his rigid obedience, but he ends up now calling this life of obedience slavery. The older brother is not lost in spite of his goodness. He's actually lost because of his goodness. There are two ways that people can be lost, one by being very bad and one by being very good. He says, "I've never disobeyed you, and so now you owe me." And here we see what he's talking about. This is not trust in the Father, it's an attempt to control. So then he says this, "When this son of yours..." Now, what we're seeing here is religion in operation, and religious people always seem to be angry about something because deep inside they are unsatisfied with the way God is operating. They look down on other people, and in a sense they are the older brother in this story, pointing his finger and saying to his father, "You, look you, this son of yours." Notice that when we feel right, we're quick to point the finger. "How dare you? I've worked for you nonstop, and while this son of yours was out there living it up, I was right here holding it down." The older brother is angry. He's looking down on his younger brother, but he's even looking down on his father. That's the ultimate humiliation. He doesn't address him as father. He insults him by saying, "Look, you," and pointing his finger at him. He won't even go into the party. I want you to see this. A bitter spirit will eventually find fault with God. In the face of perceived unfairness, an unforgiving heart will ultimately judge God. The older son felt he was mistreated, felt he was the victim in this situation, and here is where the danger lies. Because when we have a spirit of victimhood, when we bear grudges, it creates a feeling in us of superiority. It creates a moral high ground that allows us to look down on the people we feel have wronged us. But are you really better than them? Gospel forgiveness is rooted in the understanding that I'm not actually better than anyone else. The gospel destroys my sense of superiority even when I'm wronged. or maybe especially when I'm wronged. Unforgiveness keeps accounts and expects others to pay us back, but the gospel destroys this because we're aware of how much we have been forgiven. How do I know that I have forgiven someone? Well, do I beat them up in my mind? Do I play out scenarios where they pay for their sin or for their wrong? Would their downfall make me happy? If those things are true, I haven't truly forgiven. There's an author named Miroslav Volf. He said this: there is a difference between justice and forgiveness. To be just is to condemn the fault, and because of the fault, to condemn the doer as well. To forgive is to condemn the fault, but to spare the doer. That's what the forgiving God does. Thank God He doesn't keep a record of our wrongs. The father then addresses the older brother, and he says, "Dear son, everything I have is yours." Literally in the Greek, he's saying, "My child." The father treats him with such tenderness because he loves the older son in his lostness. The father has already divided his wealth to give the younger son his portion, and that means the rest of the father's estate belongs now to the older son. The older son, though, is not focused on the father's goodness or generosity. When you are serving your heavenly Father in love and in right relationship, you can actually rejoice in His generosity and kindness. You recognize whatever that God has been given to me to use. And that is where the older brother has gone wrong. The father says, "Your brother was lost, but now he is found." He's saying it's the right thing to welcome him home. In July of 1970, in the height of the Vietnam War, Tom Riley was notified by the U.S. Army that his brother Ron had been lost in Vietnam and was presumed dead. No more information was given, and so months later, Tom, who was here in the United States, left to search for his brother. That meant a trip all the way around the world in the middle of the Vietnam War to find answers about his brother. And though Tom was not a soldier, he made his way through the jungles of Vietnam in search of answers about his brother. That story about a brother who had traveled around the world out of love began to be passed on through the ranks of both armies, so that even the North Vietnamese soldiers allowed him to pass safely through enemy territory. Such is the respect for a brother's love. Right before the story of the prodigal son, Jesus tells two stories of searching. He tells about a lost sheep and a shepherd who searches. He tells a story about a lost coin and a woman who searches for it. But then he tells this story of a prodigal son. Why wasn't anyone searching in this story? It's this big question that's just hanging out there. And Jesus, I imagine, is glaring at the Pharisees as he wraps this story up, because everyone in the audience knew that the older brother was the one who should have searched for his younger brother. He should have acted. And so the father says, we had to celebrate. There's only one right way to respond to this prodigal son who's now come home. But there's a cost even for this celebration. Who pays for the celebration? Who's paying for the party right now? The fattened calf that's been killed and all the celebration that's taking place. You see, if the younger son had already squandered his portion of the father's wealth, the only thing left is the older brother's portion. And I think that's part of why he's angry. Did he hate that his brother was home? I don't know. It seemed that he was more indifferent to that. Was he angry about the cost of the party? Absolutely, because he starts to talk about it. In Romans 8, the Apostle Paul says this: "The Spirit Himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. And if we are God's children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ." In that chapter, Paul begins to kind of unpack this idea of Jesus as our older brother, our co-heir. And here is what Jesus is saying to the religious leaders who are seated in the room with all of these sinners. This implicit question that's there in his story is, who is the one doing the searching? And the answer is Jesus. He's saying, I am the one who's come to find these lost prodigals and to bring them home. The sinners who are gathered here are being carried into their celebration by their true older brother, Jesus. It's what the Pharisees should have been doing, and it's what Jesus had been sent to do. Jesus sought you and me out. I don't know how the conversation went in heaven, but when all these prodigals were lost in their sin, the Son of God did what the older brother should do, and he said, I'll go and get them, Father. He was wealthy with all the wealth of his father, but he gave it all so that you and I could be brought home. The younger son in the story comes in shoeless, dressed in rags, but he's given a robe, a ring, and sandals, and he enters into this great feast. And that is our story also. There is a day when we will be welcomed into the presence of God with a feast like no other, when we will once and for all be home. And it is only possible because of our older brother, Jesus. You and I can be restored to our Father because on the cross, Jesus was alienated from the Father. You and I can be given rights as sons and daughters of God because Jesus made himself a servant. You and I can be clothed in God's grace because Jesus was stripped on the cross and humiliated. You and I are invited to the feast of God because of Jesus, and the sacrifice for this feast is not a fattened calf like in the story that Jesus tells, but a spotless lamb. And so the question that is screaming at us at the end of this story is, will you hear the Father's heart, and will you search for those who are lost?